Well, hi, and thanks for tuning in. It's been a while since I posted anything on YouTube, something to do with a lockdown and a pandemic or something. We're going to talk about another kind of pan, and that's panoramic photography today, and how a leveler can help your panoramic photography be more efficient. So you're probably watching this video because you're either doing panoramic photography and you're interested in how you can improve it, and or you are interested in panoramic photography but don't know what it's about. So I'll just give a quick definition. Panoramic photography is where you're trying to create a wide-angle image. When we take a shot with a single lens, we only get so much wide-angle view. So by actually putting the camera on the tripod and taking a succession of shots by panning the head and overlapping those shots by about 25%, then stitching them together in something like Lightroom or Photoshop, you'll end up with an image that has a much wider view or a vista than just taking a single shot alone. But before you even think about leveling the tripod, there's some settings on your camera that you should look after before starting a panoramic shoot. And one of those things is to set your camera to manual exposure, because the last thing you want is for automatic exposure or semi-automatic exposure like aperture priority, shutter priority. Trying to adjust the exposure as you pan, the light might change across the scene, and you don't really want it adjusting each of those shots, those overlapping shots, to have equal exposure, because then it won't look natural. The other thing you should do also is put the camera into manual white balance. Again, same thing, as you pan across a scene, the camera could interpret the color balance in that scene differently, and then in post-production you're ending up having to mess around with all those shots before you stitch them together to make sure that they're matched in their look. And of course the other thing is manual focus. Focus may change if you're using autofocus when you pan across, because it might pick up a different part in each scene that's a different distance from the camera, and so it's going to throw the background out of focus or the foreground out of focus or whatever. One other thing that you're advised not to use in a panoramic shoot is a polarizer, because a polarizer works best, has the greatest effect, I should say, when it's at 90 degrees to the bearing of the sun. So if you're shooting 90 degrees away from the sun, you'll get the darkest skies, the greatest contrast, and so on. But as you pan, that effect is going to change, and it's going to look a little weird in your panoramic because you'll have dark sky over here and light sky over here. So avoid using a polarizer. So of course the other thing I mentioned at the beginning was to ensure that the tripod legs are level. And when I say legs are level, I mean the base of the tripod and not the head itself. Because if you use the bubble level on the head and you don't make sure that the tripod is perfectly level, or the column on the tripod is perfectly vertical in all directions, then you're going to have a little problem with your panoramic. And the reason for that is that while the head may look balanced or level, I should say, at one angle, as you turn it, if the legs are not perfectly level, then you're going to find that the horizon is going to start to tilt the more you pan around. So when you go to stitch those together in software, what the software is looking for are equivalent parts of each scene that it can stitch those together and eventually create hopefully a straight horizon. But in doing so, all those individual pictures are going to be kind of aligned like this rather than this, and that means you're going to have to crop off a part of the image. And you might want to include, you know, clouds in the sky or something in the foreground. So cropping is something you want to avoid if possible. So you might be tempted to just sort of eyeball the column of the tripod just to make sure that the legs are actually level. And that doesn't always work well. You can be out by a little bit if you're just you know, going around the thing and making sure it looks vertical from every angle. That's not going to assure you perfect results. And that's the reason why we're talking about this guy today. This is the leveler, and I'm going to show you how to use it. So if you extend the column on your tripod, you'll see probably 3 screws or Allen head screws or something like that. Just back those off, and then you can simply unthread the head that's currently on your tripod so that you can put the leveler on there. Let's have a look. And so there's a standard 3/8 stud that you should find there, and that's where the leveler will get mounted. So this is the Neewer DLEVX-68 Leveler. You can see that it comes with that standard 3/8 thread on the bottom, so you just put it right on the 3/8 stud on your column. And similarly on the top here, this is where you would now mount the head that you just removed from the tripod, and there is a bolt underneath here to assist you with tightening that down. So it also comes with this nifty little case, although I can't see myself using the case very much because this is fairly low profile, and I'll just leave it on the tripod head. It's or the tripod rather. It's better than, you know, removing it, putting the head back on, blah blah blah. It's but it's a nicely made unit. It really is. It's all metal, and everything. Even when we turn the adjusters on it, it feels nice and smooth. So again, it's a 3/8 thread on the bottom here, and a 3/8 stud on top of your tripod column. So simply put it on, spin it around, tighten it, and then flip the tripod over and tighten those 3 screws on the bottom. So let's say I intentionally imbalance the tripod where I know the column is not going to be perfectly vertical. So I'll just adjust this one leg down a little bit. So with that tripod leg a little shorter than the other two, it's now created a bit of an imbalance in the tripod itself, or the head itself. So I've adjusted the head with the controls to get the bubble level on the Arca Swiss adapter here right in the center in this position. But watch what happens when I rotate it. You notice the bubble is now off to the side here. That's because it's kind of leaning toward that leg, or away from that leg that is now made shorter than the other two. So if you're taking a panoramic and you pan around with the tripod in that condition, you'll get the horizon shifting rather dramatically. Now this may be a bit of an extreme case, but it hopefully demonstrates why it's important to get the base of your tripod, not the head itself, but the base of the tripod level. So once you've mounted the leveler on your column, you can then attach and tighten the screws on the bottom, by the way, just to make sure that's secure. You can then just simply thread your existing head onto the leveler and make sure it's tight by hand. Unfortunately, they don't supply any screws underneath for fastening the head down to the leveler securely, so it depends on how tightly you wind it on. Here we have the head on the leveler, and you can see from the bubble level that's on one of the 3 bubble levels. I'll show you the other 2 in a minute. That's on the leveler itself. It shows the bubble is way off here. So what I'll do is I'll start around the back and start adjusting that leveler. And you can see the head is actually moving as I do that, and the bubble is coming closer to the center. So it looks like I have to adjust the ones on the side here, and sure enough, the bubble is coming toward the middle. And then do a little bit more adjustment on the back to get that better centered. And one of these two needs adjustment, and that's looking pretty good right there. So what you would do then is you would just lock those settings down with these two thumb screws, and I think they have to be tightened against the body of the leveler itself. And as you can see, there's a bubble level on the one side, which is looking fairly level now. And there's also a bubble level on this side. So you've got three bubble levels, each about 60 degrees apart from the other. So that's one way of assuring that you've got perfect level. So now I've leveled the head so that the bubble is in the center on the Arca-Swiss adapter here, or Arca-Swiss mount. And just to show you, let's take it for a ride. We'll pan around. And you notice the bubble is staying nicely in the center because we now have essentially the base of the tripod perfectly level, and therefore the column is perfectly vertical. So it's a bit fiddly to set things up, but if you're taking an important panoramic, this is definitely worth a minute or two to get these set up properly. So I hope that's helped you understand what the purpose of the leveler is and how to improve your panoramic photography through the use of a leveler. And if you enjoyed this content, found it useful, I'd appreciate a thumbs up and maybe even subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching.